primarily by the private sector is relied on by the entire country. And if a SCADA system has a vulnerability that we know about and steps are not taken to secure it, and the whole grid goes down, the government has a right to be interested in that matter and a right to require that steps be taken to protect the nation. So I'm interested in specific comments that any of the witnesses may have about how you believe that collaboration might be enhanced in this bill. I don't think it precludes anything, actually. I don't think there's a need to enhance it because it doesn't preclude the things that you've discussed. But if you have specific suggestions on how to involve the private sector, I'd be interested in hearing them. And before I turn to you, I didn't want to neglect Mr. Bartlett, who, of course, has been known for some time on the role. I'm focusing on cyber, but the issue he is focused in on for some time that also needs attention. So anybody who has a suggestion on private sector collaboration, I'm all ears. Mr. Gammon.
I believe in the line of collaboration, one of the first things that needs to be done is the Department of Homeland Security needs to be informed and take an interest in the subject of EMP and I presume cyber attack. To give you an example, we have been, as a commission, unsuccessful in engaging Department of Homeland Security in this area. And today I went to the Homeland Security website, put in EMP, it took me to FEMA, and there it told me that EMP was a form of radioactive fallout. And it said only those who rely on electronically driven life support systems are at risk.
Could I, very good. So your DHS, pay more attention. Our new secretary, I think, will be paying attention. Mr. Fabro.
I think that the questions, I think the statement that you've made is exceptionally accurate, that we have all the pieces in place. From what I see, from what my experience indicates, is that the element of robustness as it relates to what's coming upwards from independent research, what's actually being discovered and found within the operational environments of the private sector itself isn't coming upwards. And there's no sharing mechanism for that information to come upwards to either validate, substantiate, disprove, or have some other impact on what's being done by the federal research community. Now, make no mistake, the work that's being done within DHS and DOE, absolutely valuable, absolutely valuable. The capabilities for NERC.
So the research world needs to be brought in.
It needs to be brought in, and as has been spoken about earlier, the complexities involved with the fact that there's so much vendor-specific issues related to securing this, the vendors are often exceptionally reticent to accept the independent research because it may impact a variety of different things
right.
from a business perspective.
I don't know if I have time, Mr. Chairman, to get a few quick comments from the other two witnesses under a minute total.
You have a minute.
I do believe our interests are well aligned here in terms of what to protect. One of the obligations that we have is that we enhance our security incident reporting. As incidents occur within the private sector, it's very important that quickly be shared, the incident be absolutely analyzed, and information, the lesson learned, be shared back so others can protect themselves. It's something we feel very strongly about. We think we've demonstrated that recently. We also believe in terms of research that better cyber awareness tools of what actually is occurring across the internet and large networks is very important. This is an area that the government can contribute greatly.
And couldn't the ISACs be used to that effect? To some...
We absolutely believe
right.
the ISACs be used to that effect, and they probably need some analytical support in their ability to...
Mr. Naumann, you have 15 seconds.
That much. Thank you. Very briefly, just to add on, we think the most important thing is clear and concise communication so that if there is a threat out there, that threat gets down to the users, owners, and operators who understand our system and equipment so that we can take appropriate mitigation. If we don't know about the threat, it's very hard to mitigate against it.
So this bill will certainly let you know about that threat through the FERC.
Yes, but if there's an emergency, to the extent there is time, it's very important that rather than issuing a directive, there be as much consultation as is possible under the circumstances, else our concern about unintended consequences of that of those directives.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the extra minute.
Thank you very much. Chair yields 5 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Bodley.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you again for inviting me to be here. EMP attack may be a low probability, is certainly high impact event, but when you have such a potential like your house burning, you buy an insurance policy. You do something that will make you whole in the event that that happens. I would submit that in our country we have done essentially nothing that would make us whole if this were to happen. Dr. Graham, it's my understanding that electromagnetic pulse is an unavoidable accompaniment of any and every nuclear detonation, that if it occurs at ground level, that the area of the fireball and the EMP area are not all that much different, so we've had little attention to EMP when it's a ground level attack. But if it's at altitude and if it's extra atmospheric, it's line of sight, and a detonation 300 miles high above Nebraska or Iowa would cover our whole country. Is that essentially correct?
Yes, with this footnote that even for a surface or near-surface nuclear burst, if there are things like power lines or conductors going into the fireball, that fireball acts like a tremendous battery and will drive electrical signals miles and miles beyond its perimeter, but along the lines.
It's my understanding that in your work on the commission that you interrogated 2 Russian generals who told you that the Soviets had developed and they have enhanced EMP weapons that would produce 200 kilovolts per meter. That is correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That would be 100 kilovolts per meter at the margins of our country?
It's a somewhat north-south dependent effect, but in some directions, yes.
It's my understanding that the most we have ever built and tested to is sometimes 30 and sometimes 50 kilovolts per meter. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The upper figure was used earlier and now the lower.
If in fact we could be exposed to 100 or 200 kilovolts per meter, protecting to 50 kilovolts per meter is little better than doing nothing. Or 30, it's now 30. Is that correct?
Well, it's unknown as to how good the protection would be above that because it would be an untested regime. In general, the protection could fail at the higher levels.
What proportion, what part of our electronic world would you expect to be affected by 200 kilovolts per meter?
Essentially, everything that wasn't in a conductive package, everything from PCs on up through power grids.
It would have to be in a Faraday cage and grounded if it were to survive. Is that correct?
Yes, individual components that are wrapped up in protective packages might survive it, but anything that's functional or connected to other systems would not.
In a former life, I was a scientist, and I'm always amazed at scientists and their ability to understate. I'm now kind of a recovering scientist. But Dr. Graham is a scientist, and he says that EMP is one of a small number of threats that can hold our society at risk of catastrophic consequences. In other words, that could end life as we know it. Is that correct?
Certainly as we know it in the United States. I don't think North Korea would find it a shock if they had an EMP event because they have so little infrastructure to begin with. But our country has many times the population it had, say, in 1900, and yet our facilities could be driven back to the pre-1900 level by an EMP attack, and the country could just not support that population.
This has been described, that is a high-level EMP, robust EMP laydown, as a giant time machine that would move us back a century in technology. That's roughly correct?
Yes, maybe a little more than a century, in fact.
Sir, this is such a horrendous consequence. Why are we not paying more attention to it? One of the great experts in this area, Lowell Wood, says it is just too hard. They don't want to deal